Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the smoky, wood-scented air of a Viking longhouse. You're a guest, maybe just passing through, maybe hoping to trade a few furs or gossip, but before anything else, it's dinner time. You duck beneath a low beam, and your eyes take a moment to adjust to the flickering torchlight. Long tables stretch before you, crowded with wide-shouldered folk in wool cloaks, most of them chewing on something or waving their horns of mead like punctuation marks. You've officially been invited to dine with the Norse. Congrats, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere cozy, maybe under blankets in Sweden or next to a fan in Arizona, drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge in, brushing snow off your boots, or rather, sturdy leather shoes with fur trim. The smells hit you first: roasted meat, wet wool, slightly sour ale, and something like burnt onions but in a good way. A dog the size of a small deer pads past, trailing a ragged rope leash and a half-eaten fish. Nobody seems concerned. Now here's what surprises you. Despite what you've heard about savage Vikings and endless pillaging, the dinner scene is weirdly polite. Sure, people are loud, but not crude. There's laughter, but no brawling. Everyone seems to know where they sit and how to behave, and you, fresh off the proverbial longboat, are going to have to learn quickly. You're led to a place on the side, not quite at the high table but not next to the drafty door either. Seating matters here, and you get the feeling someone just gave up a slightly better spot to accommodate you. You nod, hoping that counts as gratitude. There's no hostess with a clipboard, but there is a quiet choreography unfolding. Older men at one end, warriors at another, and people you assume are farmers or artisans sprinkled in between. The longhouse hums with layers of chatter, like a very old-fashioned open-plan office party. You catch snippets of conversations, news from the coast, how someone's cousin caught a sea spirit, a joke about cabbage that gets a bigger laugh than expected. Your bench wobbles slightly as you sit, which is perfect for the vibe. Nothing is new, but everything works. The wood under you is smooth from decades of use, polished by furs and elbows. Overhead, smoke curls toward a narrow roof opening, trying its best to escape. You try not to cough. The fire in the center of the room isn't just for warmth, it's the stove, the social magnet, the source of light, and the occasional marshmallow roaster, though marshmallows haven't been invented yet, so it's mostly onions and meat. Around it, women and young boys move steadily, dishing out portions from thick clay pots. They balance huge wooden spoons like pros. A plate, well, a shallow wooden dish, lands in front of you. It's filled with what looks like mashed peas, a generous hunk of roasted meat, lamb? Goat. Could be seal, honestly, and a triangle of flatbread with suspiciously dark edges. No forks, of course. Forks are for the future. You look around and copy what others are doing. Right-hand fingers, left-hand cupping, occasional spoonage. Nobody's licking fingers yet. You make a mental note. A girl no older than 12 brings you a carved drinking horn, already full. You nod your thanks, but she just gives you a practiced eye roll and moves on. Fair enough. To your left, a man with a beard so long it's tucked into his belt is mid-sentence about a shipwreck. He pauses to belch softly into his shoulder, then continues. To your right, a woman with 3 silver rings in one ear adjusts her toddler's sheepskin wrap and drops a bite of meat directly into his open mouth like a mother bird. He blinks at you, chewing solemnly. The atmosphere is both festive and grounded, like a wedding rehearsal dinner in a log cabin during a snowstorm. Despite the draft, it's warm enough in here for people to loosen their cloaks and show off embroidered tunics. You notice patterns, spirals, animal motifs. One guy has a raven sewn into his sleeve in what looks like genuine gold thread. Status? Probably. But maybe just a proud grandma with a fancy needle. There's a lot of subtle status signaling going on. One man gets his mead topped up every 5 minutes. Another has a plate with extra pickled cabbage, clearly special. You begin to suspect the man across from you, the one quietly eating with perfect posture, might be some sort of chieftain. Or a bard. Or just someone with good table manners. And oh, the manners. Nobody's shoving. Nobody's slurping. People are waiting their turns to speak. There's laughter, sure, and the occasional friendly shout across the hall, but overall? It's not chaos. It's closer to a formal dinner party where you're allowed to wear fur and talk about ghost cows. That said, you notice things. Like the way bread is passed to the left, not the right. Like how everyone toasts before eating. One man raises his horn and mutters something in Old Norse, something about the gods and ancestors, and people around him nod respectfully before digging in again. Historians still argue whether this level of etiquette was enforced by social norms or actual legal codes. Some say it was just custom passed down through storytelling. Others think there might have been an unspoken rulebook enforced with sharp glares and withheld turnips. You try to blend in, nibbling the bread first, safest bet, then the meat. It's salty but rich, with a hint of wood smoke. The peas are more paste than vegetable, but surprisingly tasty. You feel yourself easing into it. The warmth, the steady rhythm of background talking, the distant sound of someone tuning a lyre. Your eyelids start to feel a little heavier than they should. And just as you begin to relax, the person across from you makes eye contact, smiles, and gestures toward the fire. You suspect this is only the beginning of your Viking table education. You're still chewing, slowly now, trying not to seem like you're in over your head, when the firelight flickers just enough to reveal something glinting on the far side of the hall. At first you think it's another goblet, maybe bronze or silver, but no. It's a roast pig. Not a large one, but still, a full, crispy-skinned pig with an unfortunate apple in its mouth and herbs tucked under its haunches like it's about to take a luxurious nap. A boy no older than 14 drags it in on a sled made of polished antler and wood. It's meant for the high table, where the elders and warriors sit, but every head in the room turns to admire it. And rightfully so, this pig clearly took all day to prepare. You half expect it to give a bow. You watch as one of the women at the high table stands, lifts a long, curved blade, ornate but sharp, and carves the first piece. It's not about quantity here. The first bite is handed to the eldest man in the room, a quiet sort with long gray braids and what you're almost sure is a wolf fur collar. He doesn't speak. Just chews slowly and nods once. Ritual fulfilled. From there, the pig is carefully portioned out. Not everyone gets some. This is a treat, not a standard Tuesday dinner. But as luck would have it, a strip of belly meat makes it to your side of the hall, passed hand to hand with reverence and just a pinch of envy. You eat slowly, trying to make it last. The flavor is unexpected, smoky, sweet, herbal. Almost like rosemary and mead had a baby and bathed it in bacon grease. You contemplate faking a polite cough and pocketing a piece for later, but figure that might get you booted into the snow. Next to you, a woman is explaining something in a half-whisper to a boy with fur-lined sleeves. It's about what not to eat. Don't touch that blood pudding unless it's fresh, she mutters. And never drink the yellow broth unless it's winter and you're dying. Noted. You glance around. Most of what's being served tonight is hearty and familiar. Meat, beans, grains. A type of porridge that smells faintly of garlic and despair. But there are also strange snacks tucked here and there. At one end of the table, a man is dipping dried fish skin into what looks like mashed turnips mixed with berries. It's not good, exactly, but he seems to be enjoying it. Further down, you spot someone gnawing on a blackish cube the size of a dice. It's a fermented shark meat delicacy, or what some scholars later described as the closest thing to biting into the concept of vengeance. This, you are told, is hakarl. You wisely decide not to ask for a bite. There's another debate still simmering among scholars. Was hakarl eaten casually, or only for ritual and status flexing? Some sagas hint it was a show of toughness, others that it was meant to honor gods with strong stomachs. Speaking of gods, someone across the table makes a quiet offering, just a sliver of meat on a carved wooden plate left at the base of one of the support beams. You're told it's for Thor. He likes the fatty bits, the man whispers. And you want Thor to like you when storms come. You're about to nod when the woman on your right offers you something wrapped in birch bark. Try it, she says with a grin. It's cheese. From sheep. It might scream a little. You blink. She's probably joking. Probably. You unwrap the cheese, which is crumbly, soft, and suspiciously warm. You take a bite. It's pungent, like licking the inside of an animal's thoughts, but there's something compelling about it. Salty, fermented, slightly floral. You make a face, and she laughs. Not bad, eh? Better than whale. That's apparently a low bar. Elsewhere on the table, you spot bread again, but not just the flat triangles. Some of the more elaborate pieces are decorated with herbs and seeds. One man even has a tiny baked fish pressed into the top of his loaf. That's either an offering or someone's very early attempt at artisanal Instagram bread. Still, most of the bread is practical. Dense. Chewy. Designed to fill you up and make your jaw do its fair share of the work. Gluten-free Vikings would have had a tough time. Just as you're starting to feel full, someone claps loudly near the fire, and a hush falls over the room. A woman stands. It's the same one who carved the pig earlier, and she holds up a bowl of something steaming and dark. Mushroom soup, you think, but you're not sure. She begins a slow chant, rhythmic and low, and others join in. It's not a prayer, exactly. More like a mealtime poem. The chant tells a short tale of how food came to be, how Odin carved the world from bones, how rivers of broth fed the first forests, how the first sheep gave its milk to a tired god in winter. It's oddly soothing. You can feel the vibrations more than the words. You don't know the language, but you understand the gratitude. That, apparently, is dinner theater. Once the chant ends, people return to eating, but the mood has softened. Less noise. More chewing. A few older folks lean back and talk quietly about how things used to be when winters were longer and fish were smarter. Someone complains that no one makes proper skyr anymore. Another counters that the new sheep cheese is better anyway. You're not sure, but it sounds like a timeless debate. As the dishes begin to empty and the fire burns lower, you notice the food doesn't stop, it just gets smaller. Now it's little bowls of dried apples, roasted hazelnuts, and something like candied carrots passed around on shared platters. A sweet end to a savory meal, and likely a way to hide the fact that winter storage is tight. You're full now. Not just stomach-wise, but soul-wise. The kind of full that only comes from warm food, dim lighting, and the steady hum of humans being humans, even when they have names like Bjorn the Bone Crusher. Someone yawns near you, setting off a chain reaction. A toddler curls into a pile of cloaks. An old man's chin hits his chest. And slowly, the hall starts to quiet, not into silence, but into that soft murmur of sleepiness. Like the longhouse itself is digesting the night. You take one last sip from your horn and let your eyes wander upward, toward the shadowy beams overhead. You think you spot a carving of a dragon. Or maybe it's a goat. Hard to tell. Either way, it's watching over dinner. Your eyes linger on that overhead carving, a crooked thing with wild eyes and too many teeth. Whether it's meant to scare off spirits or just entertain the bored children staring at the rafters, you'll never know. But it fits the room, strange, comforting, and absolutely hand-carved by someone with time, a knife, and questionable judgment. You stretch a little in your seat, the kind of stretch that involves more sighing than muscle. The fire's glow has dimmed, casting the room in rich amber. Plates are being stacked, wooden bowls wiped clean with crusts of bread, and the rhythm of the longhouse shifts from feasting to loitering. Then, from the far corner, comes a low tune. No instrument at first, just humming. You turn your head to find its source, a man with a thick braid down his back and a face that could either belong to a poet or someone who yells at goats. He hums like it's second nature, as if the song has been in his lungs all evening, waiting for the right moment to spill out. Moments later, a harp emerges, small, handheld, strung with something that might be gut or fine wire. The sound it makes is delicate. Not what you expect from people who drink from horns and name their sons Snorri. But here it is, a melody as soft as a snowfall on fur. He begins to sing. You don't understand the words. Not exactly. But the story takes shape anyway, as stories do when they're sung by someone who means them. You catch fragments, a maiden waiting on a mountain, a bear who steals sunlight, a ship made from feathers and sorrow. You can feel the oldness of it, the weight of time worn smooth by retelling. Someone next to you leans in and whispers the gist. He's telling the tale of Solbjorg, the sun stealer. She once tried to hide the summer in a clay pot and broke the world into winter. Classic. The scholars are still debating whether Solbjorg was ever worshipped or just used to scare children into sleeping through blizzards. The line between myth and parenting tactic is blurry out here. A woman to your left chuckles. The clay pot was probably a metaphor, she says, passing you a piece of smoked root. It tastes like dirt and secrets. As the harp continues, the fire pops and sighs. One child crawls toward the hearth and curls into their mother's lap. A pair of old men tap their cups in rhythm. Somewhere overhead, that carved dragon, goat, stares down in solemn approval. The song winds down like a dream ending. No big finish. Just a tapering note, a breath, and then silence. You feel oddly empty and full at the same time. Story-fed. Like your mind just had a midnight snack. Another storyteller steps up. This one carries a stick with carved runes along its length, which they use to point, gesture, and occasionally bonk their knee for emphasis. Their tale is less poetic and more exuberant. Back in the day, they begin, when people still believed rocks could sing and ducks were spies. You're in. This one's a comedy, apparently. About a village that tried to make a floating house and ended up inventing communal bathing. The details are fuzzy, some mix of reeds, goat bladders, and a misinterpreted dream from a drunken fisherman, but it ends with 3 marriages, 1 divine chicken, and the origin of a famous local insult that roughly translates to bather of eels. You laugh. Everyone does. Not because it makes sense, honestly, you've lost track of the eel, but because it's familiar. That warm, drowsy kind of laughter you only get when bellies are full and bedtime is optional. A young man pipes up from the corner. "Tell the one about the melting spoon," he calls, and a chorus of "yes" echoes back. Apparently, this is a fan favorite. What follows is a tale of alchemy gone wrong. A would-be wizard who tried to turn fish oil into gold using heat, salt, and the haunted ladle of his grandmother. Spoiler: it didn't work. But what it did do was melt all the spoons in the longhouse, save for one, now kept on a high shelf and kissed for luck before cooking anything involving root vegetables. Historians still argue whether this was a parody of early metalworking attempts or just an excuse to replace the cutlery. You're still chuckling when the harp returns, softer this time, threading its way through the firelight like a ribbon of sound. The mood shifts once more. Laughter fades. Eyes get heavier. Someone yawns so deeply you worry their jaw might dislocate. The storyteller lowers their voice. A final tale is coming. It's tradition, they say. The last story of the evening must be a quiet one. No fire gods or spoon catastrophes. Just something soft and old, something the walls already know. And so begins the tale of the nightmare. Not the scary one, but the gentle dream horse, who walks silently through sleeping villages, carrying lost thoughts back to their owners. Sometimes, the storyteller says, you dream of a thing you forgot you loved, a smell, a place, a laugh, and that's her doing. She finds the pieces scattered on your pillow and sews them into dreams. You can feel the entire longhouse leaning into that silence. The flicker of the fire, the faint creak of wood cooling after a long day. Even the air seems to hush itself. You look down at your hands. They're warmer than before. Looser somehow. You're not just in the room, you're part of it now. Like you've always been here, wrapped in wool and firelight, waiting for a mare made of moonlight to carry your sleep. The story ends. Not with a word, but a breath. One last stroke of the harp. One last pop of the fire. You lean back. And you let the longhouse have you. You don't know how long you drift like that, half asleep, half woven into the night air. At some point, someone covers you with a blanket. You don't remember them doing it, but the wool smells like smoke, moss, and something oddly sweet, juniper, maybe. Comfort has a scent here, and it's surprisingly layered. The longhouse has quieted. Not gone silent. No, this place doesn't do true silence, but mellowed. The fire is now a glowing bed of coals, and the shadows no longer dance so much as stretch lazily along the walls. Around you, people are curled up in various states of recline. Some on benches, some slumped against beams, one fellow using a small dog as a pillow. The dog seems fine with it. Possibly proud. This isn't just a place to sleep, it's a kind of collective dreaming room. Each snore is a shared lullaby. Each sigh a chapter in a dream being written somewhere across the furs. You shift slightly, careful not to disturb the woven universe of limbs and wool. Your body's humming in that sleepy tired way where everything feels a bit too warm, and your own heartbeat sounds like it's padding softly through your ears in felt slippers. But just as your mind dips beneath the first layer of sleep, there's movement again. A woman gets up. She's tall, wrapped in dark fabric that shimmers like a raven's feather in firelight. She doesn't speak. She just reaches into a small pouch at her belt and begins placing items along the hearthstones, tiny things, each one deliberate. A silver ring. A twisted herb bundle. A beetle encased in amber. The room watches with the kind of attention only the deeply tired can offer, half curious, half entranced. This is the beginning of the night ritual. Not religious, not exactly, though some would say it used to be. It's more habitual. A way of reminding the walls that people live here, and that dreams should be gentle. She hums softly, then speaks a line, more rhythm than language. It's old tongue, the kind spoken in lullabies and warnings scratched onto driftwood signs. Something about wind and quiet and the favor of ash spirits. You find yourself holding your breath, like your lungs might startle the moment. The ritual ends with a splash of water over the hearth, quick, sharp, and steaming. The scent of the herbs lifts, curls around your nose, and vanishes like a ghost with better things to do. A child nearby asks, sleepily, "Is that to keep the trolls away?" Someone answers, "No. It's to keep us from becoming trolls." A logical precaution, honestly. Once again, sleep thickens the room. The kind of sleep that comes not from exhaustion, but from ritual. From story-fed bellies, soot-darkened rafters, and the comfort of knowing exactly what the next moment holds. You slip under again. And you dream. You're not alone in this dream. The longhouse dreams with you. You find yourself walking along a stony path, barefoot, the stones surprisingly warm. The air smells like last year's firewood and wet bark. A voice hums beside you, familiar but impossible to name. Around a bend, you spot a small building made entirely of books. Not bound books, scrolls, codices, wooden tablets stained with ink and cracked leather. A raven is the librarian, of course. He peers over tiny spectacles and gestures toward a chair made from question marks. You sit. The raven taps a talon. Tonight's dream topic, food you shouldn't eat, but did anyway. He sounds delighted. The scroll unrolls. The images flicker, a Neolithic stew made of fermented shellfish and tree bark, a medieval pudding involving blood, breadcrumbs, and optimism, and a 1920s snack called Glow Crisps, infused with actual radium. You blink. That last one was real. The raven nods solemnly. Very. Then he mutters, historians still argue whether it was naivete or marketing. The dream shifts again. Now you're at a table somewhere humid, under a rickety cloth canopy. You're offered something described as skyfish. It looks like a pear made of feathers and regret. You eat it anyway, because, of course, you do. And it tastes like every good idea that should have stayed in the brainstorm stage. You wake up laughing. Only it's not quite waking. More like a dream you're still holding onto with one pinky. Someone's singing again, but this time it's a lullaby. Not for you specifically, but for the whole room. Soft. Winding. Half-whispered. The kind of tune that feels like it's petting your thoughts. The lyrics, if you can call them that, involve a goose who learns the names of the stars and forgets how to honk. There's also a bit about milk that turns to honey if you whisper nicely. You are deeply unsure if this is an actual folk song or someone making things up to soothe a fussy cousin. Either way, it works. The fire finally gives one last sigh, a puff of emberlight, and then dims to a soft orange breath. You stare into that quiet firebed and let your thoughts slow to a crawl. No more stories tonight. Just the memory of them, humming in your bones like a song with no lyrics. And just before your eyes slide shut for good, you think, distantly. You never even asked what day it was. But honestly, does it matter? Time feels like a well-chewed slipper here. Soft, shapeless, and oddly comforting. You're exactly where you need to be. When you next stir, it's because of a smell. Not a bad one, thankfully, but an unexpected one. Something sharp and vinegary, with a whisper of onion and smoke? The longhouse isn't asleep anymore. The sun, if it's even up, is still hiding behind thick wooden beams and winter-gray sky. But people are moving. Boots are scuffing floors, water is being ladled, and someone is very deliberately sharpening a blade nearby. You can hear the gritty scrape, rhythmic and calm, like it's been done every morning for the past 1,000 years. A sleepy voice mutters, "Pickled eggs again?" And another answers, better than boiled cabbage. Barely. You sit up slowly, joints reluctant, hair confused. The blanket slips off your shoulders, and the cool air reminds your body that this isn't your bed, and these are not your usual morning noises. Breakfast is happening, apparently, and you're invited by proximity. In one corner, a trio of women are preparing what looks like a solidly medieval buffet. Black bread as dense as regret, hunks of soft white cheese speckled with herbs, and a ceramic pot filled with something bubbling suspiciously. You edge closer and peer in. It's a porridge of sorts, but it's been spiced with dried fruits and, is that rose water? One of the women notices your curiosity and grins. You eat it or it eats you, she says cheerfully. That's the rule. You decide to try a spoonful. It's sweet and a little sour, oddly comforting in a how did I end up in this timeline sort of way. There's chatter now. Slow, lazy conversation, the way people talk when they've shared too many dreams and not enough coffee. They talk about last night's stories. Someone brings up the bear man again. Another swears she heard the ghosts of the drowned ones whispering outside. Someone else shrugs and says, could have been the goats. They've been sounding judgmental lately. You hear more about local food customs, too. Not the ones from legends, but the kinds of meals people actually lived on day after day. Like skyr, a kind of Icelandic yogurt that's been around since before forks were a thing. Thick, tart, and allegedly invented when someone forgot to take milk off a ship for 6 weeks. Historians still argue whether that counts as discovery or just desperation with a spoon. Then there's the fermented shark. Yes, that's real, and you learn it's called hakarl. Traditionally buried in sand for months until it's safe to eat. Safe in the same way a trampoline on a cliff edge is technically usable. Someone at the table says, you get used to the smell, and you believe them less than you've believed anything in your entire life. Other offerings sound more appealing. Smoked lamb, barley cakes with wild honey, or dried berries soaked in mead. These are the staples that helped people survive winters so long they started naming icicles like pets. One older man, who spent the entire meal carving a wooden spoon with almost insulting focus, adds, in the famine years, we made soup from shoe leather. You blink. Seriously? He nods. You have to boil it twice. And don't eat the nails. He's joking, probably. As you listen, you realize how much of life, back then, and even now, revolves around making food last longer than the sunlight. Pickling, drying, salting, burying, fermenting, smoking, every meal is a negotiation with time. Someone stands and announces, it's market day. The room shifts. Suddenly there's a flurry of scarf tying, cloak fastening, and an overwhelming number of woven baskets being flung over shoulders like medieval tote bags. You're pulled along, gently, by the tide of morning errands. The outside air is bracing, and your breath fogs instantly, curling like question marks in front of your face. The village is stirring, if that's the right word. It's more like it's shrugging off the blanket of night and stretching carefully. The market is little more than a wide clearing between houses, marked by strings of cloth flags and a number of enthusiastic goats. You're surrounded by barrels of dried fish, jars of strange pastes, and, surprisingly, a whole stall devoted to combs carved from antlers. You stop at a cart selling drinks. The merchant hands you a cup of something called mjad. It's not mead, technically. It's softer, herbier. You taste it and get hints of thyme, something floral, and possibly moss. It's like drinking a politely enchanted swamp. Near the far end of the market, a woman sells small cakes wrapped in leaves. They're made of rye, dried apple, and crushed seeds, pressed together in tight little circles. You take one. It's chewy, nutty, and makes your brain slow down in the nicest way. There's nothing flashy here. No sugar rush. Just slow, steady energy, like a hug from someone who always smells faintly of oatmeal. A boy nearby is selling boiled eggs with runes painted on them. You ask why. Luck, he says. Or sometimes jokes. He offers you one that reads, never trust a goose with a plan. You buy it. As the wind picks up, someone starts telling a story by the fire pit set up in the center of the market. People gather, half listening as they sip hot broth from wooden cups. The storyteller talks about a king who once banned onions because they made his dreams too intense. About a baker who invented flatbread by accident when his roof collapsed. About a fisherman who swore that singing to his eel traps made the catch better. You can't tell what's real anymore. And honestly, it doesn't matter. Because whether it's history, dream, or just breakfast, it's all part of the same cozy fog now. You don't know how long you sit by that fire pit. Minutes melt. The wind hums low between the huts, and the scent of smoked fish lingers like an old song. Somewhere nearby, a dog is barking, not a sharp warning bark, but the kind that sounds like it's arguing with the wind. You've just started nibbling on another of those dense apple rye cakes when someone says, "Come see the workshop." No further explanation. Just that. So you do. You're led down a gently muddy path, past a fence that might have once been straight, toward a building that smells of metal and moss. The door creaks like it's a drama with hinges before, and you duck inside to find a surprisingly cozy chaos. It's a smithy, but not the thunder and sparks kind from movies. More of a methodical clink-clink sort of operation. A man with braids in his beard is carefully tapping at something that resembles a spatula. Only it's clearly not meant for pancakes. You think. Tools hang on every surface. Hooks, tongs, strangely shaped spoons, looped wires, and mysterious pokey things no one explains. The blacksmith nods toward a crate filled with strange little artifacts. Things lost and things remade, he says. Most from the ruins over the hill. You peer inside and spot what looks like a brooch shaped like a chicken. Or possibly a goose. It's hard to say, it has attitude either way. Was it valuable, you ask? He shrugs. Maybe to someone. Maybe it held garlic. Or secrets. Historians still argue whether personal trinkets like these were merely decorative or tied to specific rituals. Some suggest they had hidden compartments for herbs or charms. Others say they were fashion statements, and honestly, if you had a bronze chicken pinned to your cloak, you'd feel pretty invincible too. You're about to ask more, but the blacksmith's apprentice, a girl with a feather stuck in her sleeve, tugs you away toward the back of the shop. There, you find something unexpected, a wall of preserved snack tools. Not snacks as you think of them, no chips or candy bars, but implements for preparing small, mobile bites of food. Like iron molds shaped like suns and moons, used for baking barley cakes. Tiny skewers carved with symbols. Even a miniature pot-bellied cauldron, clearly designed for individual portions. She explains that in the 10th century, particularly in trade communities, food portability became a bit of an art form. Traveling merchants didn't have time for elaborate meals. They needed things that could be eaten while walking, bartering, or defending one's sheep from overambitious crows. Thus, the rise of what scholars half-jokingly call the prehistoric Lunchable. Bits of dried meat, pickled root vegetables, and pressed cakes wrapped in leaves or scraps of cloth. Each had to last for days, or at least until the next village. One quirky exhibit features something like a sandwich press. You learn it was used to press together dried fish paste between two thin slabs of fermented oat bread. Appetizing. Debatable. Ingenious. Absolutely. There's even a replica of what they call a travel broth pebble, a hardened ball of congealed stew that, when boiled with water, turned back into soup. Sort of like an ancient bouillon cube, if the cube had been made by a sorcerer with a sense of humor. You're told they were often flavored with seaweed, dried meat, and, oddly enough, licorice root. For digestion, the apprentice says. Or maybe just because someone lost a bet. These details drift into your brain like fog across a meadow. Every object here tells a tiny story. A spoon worn down on one edge suggests a right-handed owner who stirred something thick, possibly sticky. A flask with a cracked rim implies it was dropped in haste, maybe during a raid, or maybe just because someone tripped over a goat. Goats come up a lot here. You learn about a woman who invented a pocket stew wrap, basically a broth-soaked bread roll wrapped in waxed leaves. It didn't last long in summer, but in winter? Magic. Some even added a hint of mint for moral freshness, whatever that means. The apprentice leads you out back where herbs are drying on strings and you catch the scent of wild thyme, angelica, and nettle. We use nettle for tea and for cleaning wounds, she says. Sometimes in pancakes too. You stare. Nettle pancakes. She grins. With enough honey, anything becomes dessert. You're not entirely convinced, but you make a mental note. Do not underestimate the power of medieval honey. She waves you toward the path again. You should see the storyteller. You expect a return to the fire pit, but instead, you're led into a low wooden structure with benches carved like sleeping dogs and walls covered in painted tapestries. This is where long tales are spun like yarn. Tonight, or this morning, or whenever it is now, the storyteller is a woman with a voice like velvet rubbed over tree bark. She begins talking about food rituals from long ago, particularly those that feel like half-forgotten myths. She speaks of the bread oath, a tradition where enemies would share a single loaf before negotiating peace. If either party betrayed the agreement, the bread would supposedly turn to ash in their mouths. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic or actual food magic. Some even suggest recipes were passed down to reinforce the curse. Then comes the tale of the moon pudding, a dish made once per season, with ingredients gathered only at night, and stirred exactly 47 times clockwise. Legend says the pudding revealed dreams when eaten before bed. More likely, it caused indigestion vivid enough to feel prophetic. There's a quiet reverence in the room as she continues. No one interrupts. Not even the goat who wandered in and is now gently licking someone's sleeve. Outside, a bell rings, twice, softly. It's not a warning. Just a reminder that time is still doing its thing. The storyteller pauses and says, "The next tale begins at dusk." But for you, dusk feels more like a suggestion than a fact now. You step out, head fuzzy and full of snack wisdom you never expected to learn. The sky has turned from fog gray to something approaching pewter. You're not tired exactly, but you are slower, softer. Like you've been rewound a bit. And you're pretty sure you'll never look at a pickled root the same way again. You walk away from the storyteller's hall with a sort of enchanted daze, like you've just been fed fairy tales and barley in equal measure. The air smells of clove smoke and wet bark, and your boots, or are they clogs now, make soft scuffing sounds on the uneven path. Up ahead, there's a gathering of children, but not in the chaotic way you're used to. They sit in organized clusters, each group occupied with a different task. One bunch is painting symbols on flat stones using crushed berries and charcoal. Another is carefully threading dried beans onto string. It all looks suspiciously educational. You're waved over by an elderly man with a thick gray beard and a tunic that looks like it's been mended a few hundred times. "Want to learn the history of boredom?" he asks, as if offering you a cup of tea. Naturally, you say yes. He introduces himself as a keeper of customs, which is medieval code for someone who knows how things were done and isn't shy about correcting you. You sit beside him as he explains a part of history scholars often overlook: how people passed the time when they weren't being dramatic with swords or founding empires. Turns out, most of history wasn't epic battles or sweeping plagues, it was people waiting. For rain. For bread to rise. For trade ships to come back. For their neighbors to return their good ladle. Boredom, he says, was structured. You didn't just sit and mope. You made useful fuss. This is where you discover the ancient pastime of snack decoration contests. Yes, that's a real thing. Among certain merchant families and guild gatherings in 12th century towns, it was tradition to turn mundane food into temporary art. Bread rolls shaped like birds. Dried fruit mosaics. Pickled vegetable bouquets. Judged not for flavor, but creativity, and sometimes how long they could last without rotting. One surviving record from Bruges describes a spice loaf rooster that allegedly kept its beak shape for 3 weeks, earning its creator a silver pin and a week's immunity from dishwashing duties. There's even a surviving children's rhyme. Twist your dough and bend it thrice. Make it crow or make it mice. Judge will squint and purse his lips. If he likes it, no more whips. Yes, this rhyme suggests the stakes were high. But most historians agree it was exaggerated. Probably. The man smiles and pulls out a little hand-carved stamp. "This was my grandmother's. She used it to press her mark into soft cheese. Claimed it warded off flies and unwanted suitors." You try not to laugh, but you do anyway. It echoes lightly into the trees. As you're still admiring this cheese stamp, a horn sounds in the distance. A long, low note that seems to drift on forever. "That's the signal," the man says, rising slowly. "Time for the snack exchange." You're ushered along with a growing crowd toward an open-air platform surrounded by hanging lanterns. There, tables are set up with, honestly, It looks like a peasant farmer's version of a potluck crossed with a bake sale crossed with a ritual offering. And it's amazing. Small dishes sit on folded linen squares. Some are familiar, round loaves, wedges of cheese, bundles of herbs. Others are not. There's a purple jelly wobbling suspiciously inside a hollowed-out gourd. A meat pie with a crust shaped like a smiling eel. One dish is literally a log, until someone cracks it open to reveal layers of honeyed lentils and dried cranberries. You're told that during local festivals, families would bring a signature snack to this very spot and exchange bites. Not for trade or barter, just for the pleasure of tasting someone else's history. A practice known as guest-mouthing. Yes. It sounds weird. But don't worry, they changed the name eventually. Historians still argue whether these exchanges were just social bonding or subtle competitions for status. A better fig custard might earn your family a spot closer to the hearth next year. A burnt oat loaf. Well, enjoy your cold bench near the goat pen. You sample something called cricket porridge. No crickets inside, just named for the crunch, allegedly. It's sweet, textured like semolina, and oddly soothing. You imagine someone eating this while staring wistfully at snow through a cottage window. Someone offers you a sip of snack wine, a diluted mead infused with wild fennel and clove. It tastes like honey trying to become soup, and it warms your chest like a compliment from a teacher you thought hated you. A younger woman nearby offers you a slice of what she calls shadow bread, baked with ashes from the first fire of winter. Symbolic, she says. Helps digest sadness. You nod solemnly while trying not to choke on how dry it is. You take a moment to look around. This isn't chaos. It's choreography. Generations of knowledge folded into food, passed hand to hand. Every bite carries memory, even if that memory is just, "My uncle once mistook this for a poultice." And that's where the oddest snack of the evening appears. A man in blue robes sets down a wooden tray filled with ice. Tiny shards of chipped lake ice, carefully arranged around candied pine needles. He explains it's a spring thaw tribute, eaten quickly before the ice melts. For luck in travel and digestion, he says, before tossing back a shard like it's an oyster. You try it. It crunches. It tastes like the forest pretending to be dessert. And somehow you love it. The sun is definitely lower now, gilding everything in amber. You feel like you're moving through a dream, one small bite at a time. Someone hands you a pouch of roasted barley seeds mixed with salt and dried plum. For the road, they say. It keeps stories close to the tongue. And you believe them. You really do. By the time you leave the snack exchange, your hands are sticky with plum syrup and a little grain dust, your belly pleasantly full, and your mind softly buzzing with all the strangeness and sweetness of the evening. You shuffle toward the quieter edge of the fairgrounds, where the noise fades into gentle murmurs and the scent of roasted things gives way to pine, wool, and wood smoke. Here, under low-hung lanterns swaying like sleepy fireflies, is what appears to be a demonstration area, a kind of slow-motion circus featuring the lost crafts of medieval life. You stop at a small enclosure where two people are demonstrating the art of quill twisting, which is exactly what it sounds like, reshaping goose feathers for either writing or, for some reason, hat decoration. The man doing the twisting looks up and grins, explaining that in certain towns, hats weren't considered respectable unless they had a pointy bit that danced in the wind. Quill dancing became a kind of passive-aggressive way to show off during formal processions. The longer your feather bobbed, the more respected your gossip probably was. Just behind the hat feather station, you catch sight of something glinting, a pile of strange tools laid out on a cloth. A woman in a linen apron approaches, hands covered in flour and soot. "This is the forgotten world of snack engineering," she says, dramatically but not incorrectly. She shows you an array of devices used in ancient snack making, a short-bladed bread gouger, used to create hollow spaces in crusts for secret fillings, a mesh-topped pan called a toast shaker, used to flavor toast with falling herbs, and most intriguingly, a twisted wooden screw press meant to flatten pears into what she calls bed fruit, a kind of edible mattress topper. You raise an eyebrow. She nods. For real. They'd press the fruit into thin sheets and lay them on hay beds. It smelled sweet, deterred pests, and if you got hungry in the night, well, bed fruit. Historians still debate whether bed fruit was common among working families or just an eccentric habit of minor nobility. Some say it was used during illness to cheer the patient. Others believe it was part of a short-lived interior decorating trend that also included dried apple garlands and edible doorknobs. No one agrees entirely, but all of it feels wonderfully unnecessary. You move on. Next, a group of apprentices in checkered tunics are performing a reenactment of the Great Snack Theft of 1322, which, judging from the amount of giggling, seems less like a criminal act and more like a legendary prank. The story goes like this. In a small alpine village, during a particularly dull winter, someone began stealing bundles of preserved treats, fig rolls, spiced nuts, candied violets, from homes. No signs of forced entry. Just vanished snacks. A local monk eventually uncovered the culprit, a teenage girl with a homemade pulley system that let her yoink things through chimneys without a sound. Instead of punishment, the village held a contest to recreate her snack-stealing method, calling it the art of sly morsels. It became a winter festival game. The winner got a wreath of raisins and 20 minutes to say whatever she wanted to the mayor. You chuckle. History is weirder when no one's watching. A bell chimes somewhere behind you, soft and echoing, like it's underwater. You turn to find a narrow path flanked by woven lanterns and lined with, wait, is that a carpet made of moss? It leads toward a dimly lit tent with strings of little paper pennants fluttering in the breeze. Each pennant has a doodle of a snack drawn in charcoal, crackers, stews, pears, mysterious blobs. Welcome to the Lost Recipes tent. Inside, you're met with silence, so quiet it feels sacred. The air is heavy with cardamom and clove, and one corner smells like old book pages steeped in tea. Around the room are little podiums, each displaying an object under glass. One is a dried banana slice shaped like a coin. Another is a beet-stained handkerchief with illegible notes scribbled in brown ink. Nearby, a ceramic bowl with a broken edge holds what looks like a biscuit that time forgot. These are remnants of forgotten meals, foods known only through half-scribbled notes, traveler's journals, or kitchen walls scratched with desperate instructions like, more salt than last time. A robed figure approaches and whispers, this is the only place where we recreate meals from memory and myth. She gestures to a low table with 3 dishes arranged carefully. One is a pale gray pudding known only as wind mash, supposedly eaten by stormwatchers in coastal huts. Another is feast sponge, a savory cake soaked in broth and reheated on stones. The third, a cold jelly called nun's paws, has ingredients listed as apples, salt, something red, and mercy. You try a spoonful of nun's paws. It tastes like regret, and maybe strawberry. It's honestly hard to tell. Still, there's something soothing about it. Like eating a food you don't understand but feel somewhere in your bones. A small placard reads, taste is time travel. Swallow carefully. You look up to see a wall covered in drawings of vanished dishes, willow candy, sleeping bread, stone ham. Some sound made up. Others feel hauntingly real. One drawing simply says, we don't know what this was, but it smelled of rain. It makes you wonder how much history we've forgotten, not because it wasn't important, but because it tasted odd, or spoiled too quickly, or sounded silly when spoken aloud. That's the flavor of tonight. Not just the snacks, but the quiet grief of what we'll never taste again. You step back out into the cool night air, your thoughts still half-crumbed with wind mash, and follow the winding path back toward the main lane. Somewhere a soft lute plays. You hear the sound of someone snoring gently in a hay bale. You're not entirely sure whether you've wandered into history, or if history has curled up beside you and offered a snack. Either way, you're not hungry anymore. The lull of lute music draws you onward, your steps softened by straw and well-trodden dirt. By now, your feet ache with that pleasant kind of fatigue reserved for days spent walking through wonder, and your mind swims in the low tide of detail. Pressed pears, edible garlands, and the solemn absurdity of nun's paws jelly. You pass a sign nailed to a crooked post, Snack Laws and Edible Crimes Pavilion this way. Naturally, you follow. Inside, the air is thick with the musky scent of old parchment and powdered ginger. Dim lanterns swing gently overhead, casting elongated shadows over scroll-lined walls. You find yourself in a long, museum-like corridor of bizarre food-related legislation, displayed with the reverence of priceless artwork. A plaque near the entrance explains that food laws throughout history have been less about health and more about image, hierarchy, and sometimes, just plain stubbornness. Take, for example, the 1531 English Pudding Decree, which required all gooseblood puddings to be boiled within sight of a church steeple. The law was supposedly passed after a string of pudding-related food poisonings, but historians still argue whether it had more to do with superstition than safety. Some believe the steeple itself was irrelevant. It just served as a convenient landmark, so that the townsfolk could tell if a pudding was godly boiled. Others think the law was symbolic, a way to spiritually sanitize the use of animal blood. You wander past a tax ledger from 18th century Prussia that itemizes levies on cake layers. Yes, the more tiers on your birthday cake, the more you paid. Which leads you to consider how many candles could fit on a single-tier cake and whether there were legal loopholes involving muffins. Another exhibit is devoted to the cheese rebellions, a phrase that sounds made up but isn't. In early 19th century Brazil, a rural district refused to abide by a new import restriction that limited local cheeses from being sold at the main port. Furious farmers took to the streets, flinging soft rounds of queijo minas like protest pies. The rebellion ended when a visiting governor slipped on a wheel of cheese and fractured his dignity. Historians still debate whether the rebellion was about autonomy, economics, or sheer dairy pride. Around the next corner, a softly spinning globe draws your attention. Suspended in a frame, the sphere glows faintly, pinpointing locations where snacks once sparked controversy. One dot blinks in 14th century Cairo, tagged, Caraway Incident. You lean in. Apparently, a shipment of toasted caraway seeds was accidentally labeled as gunpowder and confiscated by city guards. When it was discovered to be edible, not explosive, the seeds were handed out to local children, who then used them to pelt an unpopular merchant. That merchant, claiming divine retribution, banned all caraway from his properties. The edict caused a shortage of seed-studded bread known as sleeper's crust, traditionally eaten at bedtime. That's the moment when you realize just how often snacks have caused absolute chaos. Quietly, crunchily. One panel explores flavored disguises, instances where people used food to hide other substances, both noble and not. In Renaissance Florence, perfumed honey was used to smuggle love letters. In Qing Dynasty China, secret messages were baked into almond cookies, then crumbled intentionally for disposal after reading. And during the American Civil War, soldiers reportedly used hardtack biscuits as makeshift envelopes when paper ran out. There's even a preserved biscuit on display with faded script etched on its surface, reading, "Tell Sarah the beans are safe." No one knows who Sarah was, or why the beans needed protection, but the biscuit has become a minor internet mystery in recent years. You're pulled toward another corner labeled, Forbidden Feasts. Here you learn of snacks banned not for danger or taxation, but for being too pleasurable. In certain Puritan settlements in 17th century New England, candied apple slices were outlawed during Lent, not because they were sinful, but because people kept getting caught hoarding them under floorboards. The resulting ant infestations, not moral panic, led to the ban. The same exhibit mentions how, in a remote Siberian monastery, monks banned dried figs after one novice claimed they made his dreams too vivid. A surviving diary entry reads, "Saw goat with my mother's face. Do not feed me figs again." Another oddity. In early Edo period Japan, there were strict regulations on street vendors selling pickled plums during monsoon season. Not because of spoilage concerns, but because the scent was said to awaken ancestral memories. Whether that was meant metaphorically or literally remains hotly debated. Some say the law was an attempt to curb emotional disturbances during rainy months. Others believe it was just a bureaucratic misunderstanding involving incense and snack carts. And then, beneath a glass dome near the end of the exhibit, sits a single item, a half-burned parchment labeled Crimes of Confection. It's a list, barely legible, of noble families accused of misusing sugar sculptures during banquets. One name is underlined thrice. You squint. The note beside it reads, "This duke had a sugar replica of his rival made, and then bit its head off before dessert." It's the historical equivalent of rage tweeting, but with frosting. You can't help but smile at how serious all of this once was, and how deliciously absurd it feels now. A gentle chime signals closing time for the pavilion. You turn to leave, your head a sleepy kaleidoscope of gooseblood pudding, legal cakes, edible threats, and snack-fueled civil disobedience. As you exit, a final sign hangs above the archway. To break bread is human. To fight over snacks is tradition. Outside, the fairgrounds are dimmer now. Lanterns flicker lower, the crowds have thinned, and somewhere a child giggles in their sleep from a hay wagon. You feel full, not just from food, but from stories. From secrets salted and sugared and tucked into the folds of history. And as your fingers graze a forgotten raisin in your pocket, you smile. By now, your body is winding down whether you notice it or not. The nighttime air is softer, settling in around the pavilions like a velvet curtain. But something curious still calls to you, not food this time, not strange laws or jellied marvels. No, this next turn leads to a tented hall of rituals and remedies. A banner flaps gently above the entrance, ancient sleep snacks and bedtime beliefs. You step inside, and the hush is immediate. The warm, herb-scented air embraces you like a woolen shawl. A low hum plays from hidden speakers, something between a lullaby and the sound of a cat purring beside a hearth. This is where the world fairs of taste merge with the world fairs of dreams. Your eyes adjust to the candlelit gloom. The first display features a Babylonian clay tablet etched with a sleep recipe. Translated, it reads, "Mash dates with goat's milk, stir in lotus dust, and speak the name of your favorite cloud." Some historians argue whether lotus dust referred to the plant or a powdered metaphor. Others suspect the ritual was less about the ingredients and more about the rhythm of the preparation, something to slow the body down as night drew close. A soft spotlight illuminates a medieval Egyptian apothecary's stand, recreated in detail. Bowls of dried figs, roasted fenugreek, crushed hibiscus. A sign invites you to smell but not touch. You lean in. The hibiscus is tart, almost citrusy, and the fenugreek smells like burnt sugar mixed with maple. Popular among sleepless scribes, the plaque says, this tea was brewed during long manuscript nights. Some of the monks would dip pieces of stale barley bread into the tea, chew slowly, and whisper verses to ease the transition from illuminated page to slumber. Whether the verses mattered is up for debate. Some researchers believe the humming itself, like a Gregorian exhale, was the key ingredient. On a raised dais sits a reconstructed bedchamber from 4th century China. Lacquered furniture, embroidered sheets, and, on the bedside table, a bowl of rice water sprinkled with plum blossom salt. The drink, chilled and served in tiny sips, was believed to quiet the heart. A nearby scroll warns not to speak for an hour after drinking it, lest your dreams scatter like frightened birds. In another alcove, there's a replica of a native Hawaiian hail noho, or sleeping house, with woven mats and calabash bowls filled with mashed breadfruit and coconut. These were nighttime comfort foods, often accompanied by chants or whispered genealogy stories. Elders would speak until the youngest child fell asleep, voice trailing like tide foam. The idea was that dreams were safer when guided by ancestral names. An attendant in soft slippers offers you a tasting dish of dream paste, a blend inspired by Aztec traditions. Ground maize, honey, and crushed cacao nibs, rolled into small spheres. Historically eaten before bed by nobility, and believed to inspire visions of sacred animals. You nibble one, and the texture is gritty, yet oddly comforting. It tastes like a sleepy sunrise. Nearby, a strange item sits under glass, a tiny stone pillow carved from volcanic rock. Labeled, Heian Era Japan, circa 1100, the plaque explains it was once used by noblewomen who believed that cooling the neck improved dream clarity. Historians still argue whether this was medicinal or purely cosmetic, used to preserve the shape of a hairstyle overnight. One faded woodblock print shows a woman resting her head on the stone while a servant fans her with a branch dipped in lavender oil. The caption reads, "To sleep is to travel. You must pack well." Another niche explores the snacks given to children to keep their dreams safe. In ancient Mali, ground baobab seeds were mixed with honey and ash and pressed into discs. Mothers would hide one beneath the child's sleeping mat as a symbolic shield. The disc wasn't eaten but burned the next morning to carry away bad dreams. You find yourself imagining the smell, sweet, smoky, earthy, and wonder whether the ritual worked or if it simply gave children something to believe in before they drifted off. Either way, it's beautiful. A rotating pedestal holds perhaps the oddest item so far, a piece of bed cheese from 19th century rural France. This wasn't an insult, but a real term for a soft cheese spread on bread only before sleep. Locals believed it lulled the digestive system into a calm, chewing dream, where the body finished the meal in spirit. Some insisted you had to face north while eating it. Others swore the magic was in licking the crust, not biting it. toward the far end of the tent is a wall of drawers labeled Dream Journals. You slide one open to reveal a translated fragment from a Greek physician who recorded what patients ate before their strangest dreams. One line reads, "Goat yogurt with mint led to a recurring fish." Another, "After figs, she dreamt of a door that wouldn't close." A smaller drawer contains dream talismans, amulets from Indonesia, sleep beads from Tunisia, tiny silk bags filled with crushed nutmeg and tucked under the pillow in Georgian England. All tied to food, or herbs, or the gentle wish to pass the night undisturbed. You exit through a curtain made of stitched tea bags, silly but soothing, and into the cool evening. The stars have come out now, pinpricks in velvet, and a faint wind ruffles your hair. You glance back at the tent, now glowing amber from within like a giant sleeping cat, and feel that strange sensation of having both eaten and exhaled something essential. Somewhere between goat's milk and breadfruit, between sweet rice water and ancient cheese, you've gathered a pocketful of dreams. And they're already beginning to rustle. The breeze carries you down a quieter lane now, your feet scuffing gently along the packed earth path, hands loose by your sides, stomach full of curiosity and more than a few fictional cheeses. A large, ivy-wrapped arch ahead creaks slightly in the wind. Painted above it in Art Deco lettering are the words, "Pavilion of Peculiar Punishments and Stranger Laws." You pause, tilt your head. Intrigued? Yes. Terrified? Only a little. You duck through the arch, and suddenly everything smells faintly of parchment and old brass. You're greeted by a sleepy automaton dressed like a Renaissance magistrate, one eye twitching in slow loops as it gestures you forward with a mechanical scroll. "Welcome to the legal lounge of the world's oddest rulebooks. Don't worry, nothing painful here. Just some laws too weird to invent and punishments too cozy to be taken seriously." You begin with the quiet territory of Bhutan. A glass case holds a 17th-century scroll dictating that any man who frowns before sunset must perform a kindness by moonrise. Beneath it, a small bowl of rice with a paper tag, "Mandatory bedtime snack for repeat offenders." Historians still argue whether this was a religious directive or simply an early form of community mood management. A few steps down, you reach the Ottoman Empire's 16th-century contribution. There's an ornately carved bench labeled the Silent Seat. According to legend, gossipers and loud dinner guests were required to sit here for an hour, sipping cold yogurt soup and writing compliments to each other. One scribe wrote, "Your voice is as soft as a soup spoon." Another simply penned, "I like your shadow." Next up, Edo period Japan, where a village edict once fined people for yawning too loudly in public. The punishment: 2 nights of forced early bedtime and a meal consisting only of pickled radish and 1 boiled chestnut. Modern scholars think this may have had more to do with food shortages than manners, but still, it's the earliest recorded case of legally mandated napping. A corridor of framed laws awaits. One from colonial Boston reads, "No pie shall be consumed on Tuesdays unless it is mincemeat." Another, in scratchy French from 1812, suggests that anyone caught snoring through Mass must carry a pillow around town for a day, on their head. A portrait beside it shows a man looking rather pleased with himself under a paisley cushion hat. Then you arrive at a peculiar contraption, part hammock, part lectern, used in 19th-century Venezuela as a sentence bed for thieves of minor goods. The accused had to lie here in view of the town and listen to lullabies written by local schoolchildren about the importance of honesty. One preserved verse goes, "Don't take bread, just take a nap. Kindness fits like grandma's lap." Somewhere to your left, the scent of roasted herbs wafts through the air. You turn to find a Roman reenactment stand, where actors dressed in tunics recite laws from the 12 tables, softly, as though reading poetry. One actor hands you a scroll replica that reads, "If one's neighbor grows poppies past regulation, offer figs and a warm warning." Oddly specific. Maybe fictional. Still soothing. A smaller room, almost like a reading nook, houses the punishment pillows exhibit. Here, embroidered cushions from various cultures bear images of transgressions and the sleepy corrections that followed. In 13th-century Nepal, for example, it was said that stepping on temple steps with your left foot first warranted a night of dream fasting. No snacks, no stories, no midnight murmuring. Instead, one would rest on a pillow filled with lavender and ash, meant to purge the imbalance. You pass a sign, "Petty Crimes, Cozy Times." Under it are small crates displaying alternative sentence practices. In 18th-century Wales, Stealing a neighbor's butter without asking meant delivering a handwritten dream recipe the next day. Most included warm milk, clover tea, and poetry that rhymed with sleep. Repeat offenders were made to babysit sheep overnight. Strangely relaxing, unless the sheep were rowdy. From the Caribbean comes a curious law from 1720s Barbados. Any person caught fake crying at a funeral would be required to perform 3 hours of nighttime humming near the grave, soft lullabies only. The idea was to calm the spirit you'd tried to confuse. Historians still debate whether this ritual stemmed from African traditions or was a local invention to discourage drama. One particularly strange punishment comes from 15th-century Venice. For boatmen who rowed too loudly past sleeping districts, the ruling magistrate decreed a fine payable in pastries. These were then distributed to the offended sleepers the next morning, warm and still sugar-dusted. A recipe card beneath reads, "Sweet apologies, made from rice flour and orange peel." You kind of want to be offended, just for the pastries. As you shuffle along, you reach the nap mandates installation. In ancient Korea, a village edict reportedly required elders to rest between 2 o'clock and 3:30 p.m., and those caught working instead were scolded with gentle songs. If the offense was repeated, the community would kidnap the offender and rock them in a giant bamboo cradle until sleep overtook them. Probably adorable. Possibly itchy. A soft-toned narrator plays through a hidden speaker. Sometimes the punishment was just the town noticing you were tired. To your right, you spot a strange little hallway titled Edible Justice. These were culinary consequences for mild misbehavior. In parts of medieval Morocco, bakers who undermeasured their loaves were made to eat their own bread, unsalted and cold, served with bitter mint tea. The hope that they'd learn not just accuracy, but empathy, and maybe better seasoning. In 1920s Paris, a short-lived law required anyone accused of night noise, a delightful euphemism, to host a silent supper. Guests wore slippers. Music was forbidden. The only sound allowed was the slicing of soft cheese and the clink of forks against porcelain. Most offenders became repeat hosts. Unsurprising. And then, just before you exit, you come to a softly lit corner titled Laws That Made Sleep Sacred. From ancient Persia to pre-colonial Philippines, records show societies that protected slumber with surprising reverence. In one village, waking someone unnecessarily after midnight could result in a full day of food preparation for the family of the disturbed. Imagine a plate of apologies, seasoned with regret. Your head is filled with a gentle clatter of nonsense laws and sleepy justice. No alarms. No shackles. Just societies deciding, often hilariously, that the right punishment for life's smallest slips might simply be more rest. You leave the tent with a smile, wondering if modern life could use a few bedtime verdicts of its own. Maybe the next time someone cuts you off in traffic, you'll just wish them a mandatory nap. The moment you step outside the pavilion of peculiar punishments, the air smells sweeter, like cinnamon bark and clove smoke drifting from unseen stalls. There's a hush now, a kind of fairground exhale, as though even the crowd knows it's time to start winding down. You follow a narrow gravel path lit by low lanterns, their glow filtered through amber-tinted glass. The next structure looks like an oversized gazebo draped in velvet and silk banners, each embroidered with steaming bowls, pickled things, or fermented oddities. Welcome to the International Midnight Snack House, a 1920s World's Fair exhibit that doubled as a culinary dreamscape and a mildly unsettling digestive experiment. You duck inside and are immediately greeted by a cheerful man in a fez and pinstripe apron who offers you a spoonful of something gelatinous. You smile, nod politely, and make a mental note to pretend to eat it if needed. But then, wait, it tastes like floral honey and cloud. From Persia, he says. Rosewater pudding for late-night poets. The snack house is divided into zones, each dedicated to a culture's favorite pre-sleep indulgence, or in some cases, their oddest. You wander over to the Andean twilight corner, where a young woman in traditional Quechua dress offers you tunta, a freeze-dried potato. Not exactly melt in your mouth, but her smile is so kind you chew thoughtfully and nod as if it's the best thing you've ever tasted. The Inca believed it prepared the body for altitude dreams, she explains. Helps the soul float lighter. Just a few feet over, there's a recreation of a 1920s Filipino kitchen hut. An elderly man stirs champorado, a warm chocolate rice porridge traditionally eaten during rainy mornings, but also beloved by insomniacs. He pours you a small bowl and gestures to a jar of dried fish. Salty and sweet. Like memory. You don't argue. It's oddly perfect. Historians still debate whether this fair's midnight snack house was a sincere cultural showcase or just a covert marketing ploy by international food producers. Either way, you're happy it exists. Next, you're drawn to the Balkan slumber table, where attendees in embroidered vests serve ayran, a tangy yogurt drink said to calm the nerves. One woman with a sleepy laugh insists it's better than lullabies. She even demonstrates a traditional shoulder rocking while sipping. You feel oddly soothed watching her nearly doze off mid-beverage. In the Ottoman spice loft, a teenager sprinkles sumac over a wedge of warm bread and offers it with a whisper, for dreams without bitterness. Next to him, another display explains how Ottoman physicians once prescribed different herbs before bed depending on one's mood. Basil for melancholy. Cumin for courage. Coriander for unspoken thoughts. Whether any of it worked is still debated, but the display is so beautiful you don't really care. Suddenly, there's a distinct scent, smoke and sweetness. You turn toward the Saharan campfire nook, where two men in flowing blue robes roast dates over low coals and mash them into a paste with goat's milk. You sit on a carpet and accept a bite. It's caramel-like, with just a hint of ash. They tell you nomadic tribes used it as a kind of travel lullaby: chew, sleep, forget the sandstorms. From there, you drift toward the Nordic midnight meal hut, where it's astonishingly cold despite being inside. Everything is smoked. There's smoked cheese, smoked fish, even smoked apples. For dreaming of winter cabins, a Swedish guide murmurs, handing you a slice of reindeer jerky. You chew it slowly, listening to a lullaby played on a nickel harpa, a keyed fiddle that sounds like something from an ice-covered fairy tale. You pause at a shelf labeled questionable elixirs and sleep tonics. One glass bottle reads, Elixir of the Moon, guaranteed to calm the spleen. Another, Sleep Draft Number 17, contains mild opium and enthusiastic fennel. You wisely choose to just sniff the corks. Even in a fantasy fair, some boundaries should remain. Further on is the Aztec snack altar, covered in maize cakes, cacao nibs, and toasted insects. A young woman offers you a cracker made from amaranth and maguey syrup. For strong dreams, she explains. And good teeth. You decide not to ask how those two are connected. Instead, you savor the mild sweetness and the crunch. Okay, maybe just a little bug in there. In the Southeast Asian Pantry Pavilion, a wooden sign reads, The Spices That Lull. You sample banana fritters dusted with nutmeg, sips of pandan milk, and a strange but delicious lemongrass jelly. A sign explains that certain spices were believed to align one's sleep with ancestral dreams. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were more spiritual or culinary, probably both. At the Australian bush tucker stand, you meet a young Aboriginal man who tells you about wattle seed and its earthy, roasted aroma. He hands you a small cup of wattle pudding and says, This one's for dreaming about stars you've never seen. You eat slowly, staring up at a ceiling painted to mimic the southern sky. A few final booths round out the world of late-night snacks. The Italian corner is pure comfort, warm milk with honey, served with slices of stale bread toasted over olive oil. The stale bread is key, the booth host insists. Fresh bread excites the mouth. Old bread humbles it. Then, from nowhere, comes the distinctive sound of accordion music. A French stand appears, literally appears, like it wheeled itself into place. There's onion soup, wine-spiked cherries, and tiny slices of Roquefort on apple rounds. One man swirls a spoon and announces, For sleep with drama. But gentle drama. You're full now. Not just with food, but stories and strange comfort. You realize this whole pavilion was more than snacks. It was about how people across the world prepare to surrender the day, how they turn food into ritual, ritual into care, and care into sleep. Even the wildest flavor somehow feels like a bedtime story told with the tongue. Before you leave, the fez-wearing host offers one final treat, a cube of lavender sugar wrapped in fig leaf. For your dreams, he says. And your breath. You step outside into the cool night, the wind tugging at your sleeves like a reminder. There are more stories ahead. But for now, you're fed, comforted, and just the right amount of strange. The fairground grows quieter as you wander past a row of flickering electric lanterns, their light casting long, sleepy shadows across the gravel. Your shoes crunch softly now, like a lullaby you're walking through. Past the International Snack House, the terrain changes subtly. The path becomes sandy, the air more humid. You're headed for one of the lesser-known exhibits at this World's Fair, one almost forgotten even during its heyday. A painted wooden sign appears, tilted slightly, as though trying to decide whether it still wants to stand, "Homes of the Future, but from the Past." Yes, that's really what it says. And beneath it, a subtitle, "Domestic Utopias from Ancient Cultures and Imagined Tomorrows." You stifle a yawn and step inside, half curious and already imagining the creaky recreations waiting for you. The first diorama is unexpectedly grand, a reimagined Babylonian courtyard house, complete with miniature water channels running between tiled floors and open atriums. You run a finger along the cool stone railing, and a placard informs you that ancient Babylonians sometimes built shaded terraces specifically for stargazing during bouts of insomnia. Historians still argue whether these architectural choices were practical or spiritual. Either way, you imagine yourself lying there, watching constellations drift overhead, belly full of barley stew and plum wine. Next comes an oddity, a medieval Icelandic turf home, cozy, dark, and low to the ground. The scent of hay and wool lingers in the air. A wax figure lies under layers of fur, next to a sleeping dog. One side of the hut includes a loom and another, oddly enough, a pile of fermented shark in a clay bowl. Supposedly a snack. You don't dare try it. The display notes that during long winters, Icelanders developed a routine of segmented sleep, waking for a few hours in the middle of the night to read, whisper, or just think. Kind of like ancient mindfulness, but with way more frostbite. You move into the next chamber, where you're suddenly barefoot on woven mats. It's a Japanese Edo period home, complete with tatami floors and sliding paper doors. Soft koto music plays from a hidden speaker. A diorama shows a family sleeping in a row, like stacked parentheses. Another figure sits cross-legged beside a candle, sipping warm sake. The description explains how pre-industrial Japan valued the twilight hours, and how silence was considered part of proper hygiene. Even noise could make the soul restless, one scroll claims. You try not to sneeze. There's a section titled Unrealized Utopias, where things get interesting. One display shows a model of Da Vinci's ideal city, a multi-level urban plan designed to separate noise, waste, and labor in elegant tiers. His city included clean air for dreamers and elevated walkways for stargazers. Built for logic, the display reads, but maybe too logical to love. Right next to it is a 1920s fantasy prototype for the subterranean sleep chamber of the future. Think Art Deco meets coal mine. It was pitched as a silent sleeping vault, immune to light, noise, and marital disagreement. There's a button labeled Simulate Sleep Hum, and you press it. A low, hypnotic vibration fills the space, like a whale humming through velvet. You're almost tempted to lie down right there, on the fake aluminum cot. To your left, things get weirder. The Egyptian dream house isn't based on any real archaeological site, and the placard admits this. Inspired by hieroglyphic poetry, it says vaguely. Still, it's beautifully done. Palm frond ceiling, date wine jars, soft piles of linen. In the corner, a figure wears a reed circlet around their head, meant to catch dreams before they drift into the Nile. You wonder if dream catchers actually began here, before migrating north through trade routes, or if that's just sleepy imagination doing its thing. You nearly miss the next room, veiled behind thick curtains. Inside is a Zulu homestead replica, round walls of earth and a domed thatched roof. The air smells of wood smoke and dried herbs. A gourd bottle sits beside a reed mat. A panel explains that in many Bantu-speaking cultures, sleep was seen as a communal act, and dreams were often shared in morning storytelling. The line between memory and prophecy was negotiable, one caption says. You nod like you understand, but you mostly just want to lie down on the mat. Then comes a curveball, literally. The futurist sleep orb, a spherical capsule designed by a Viennese eccentric in 1919 who believed gravity was the root of all fatigue. His theory: spinning the human body slightly off-axis would lull the brain into a theta wave trance. He got dizzy a lot, the guidebook adds helpfully. The orb never made it past prototype, but here it stands, rotating slowly, lit by internal LEDs. You reach out and touch the curved glass. It's warm. Probably not safe. Definitely intriguing. Another darkened hall showcases sleep masks across time. Roman soldiers used strips of linen soaked in vinegar and rose oil. Qing dynasty nobles slept with jade eye covers to maintain qi flow. A 1920s American inventor designed a leather mask lined with mothballs, claiming it warded off insomnia spirits. Unsurprisingly, it didn't catch on. There's a soft whir as you enter the final room. It's empty, except for a white hammock strung between two brass pillars. A sign reads, "Lie down if you dare, but just for a minute." So you do. The moment your back touches the fabric, gentle wind chimes play overhead. You close your eyes. Behind your eyelids, you imagine all these homes merging, turf huts with tatami mats, dream orbs beside starlit terraces, silence stitched with spices and song. You stay there a while, rocking slightly, as if the fair is slowly winding you down from within. The odd thing is, every culture had its rituals for rest. Their tools, their beliefs, their foods and furnishings. And somehow, even without knowing it, you've adopted pieces of each tonight. A bite of figure, a sip of cumin milk. A stray thought about shared dreams under cold stars. The fair may be almost over, but the story isn't. There's still a whisper of history left to lull you. You emerge from the sleep exhibit slightly dazed, half-wrapped in imagined linens and the scent of sandalwood. Outside, the fair's paths are quieter now, dotted with lanterns flickering like sleepy fireflies. Somewhere, a mechanical band plays a sluggish waltz for no one in particular. Your feet carry you without much thought past another cobbled avenue, this one marked by a crooked sign that simply reads, "Maritime Snacks and Seafaring Oddities." It sounds edible, maybe? Intriguing, definitely. You step inside a dimly lit pavilion built to resemble the belly of a ship, wooden beams overhead, ropes and netting slung across the walls. Everything smells faintly of brine, lemon peel, and something you hope isn't cod oil. The first display greets you with a wooden crate filled with hardtack, those famously rock-solid biscuits beloved by 19th-century sailors and despised by 19th-century molars. You pick one up. It feels like a fossilized coaster. Still edible, the sign assures you. Technically, a small dish of molasses sits beside it. This, it turns out, was the trick. Dip it long enough, chew slowly, and try not to chip a tooth. One sailor's diary nearby is open to a page where he describes hardtack as a meditation in flavorless resistance. Charming. Next to that is a curious find, a plate of salted duck eggs wrapped in banana leaf, allegedly part of a gift exchange between a Chinese merchant crew and their Peruvian hosts. Historians still argue whether this exchange occurred during the early 1600s or was merely a legend passed down through dockside storytelling. Either way, it smells far better than the hardtack. You step forward into a small theater room where dim film footage plays on loop, black and white sailors balancing pots on choppy waves, stirring stews while seabirds hover hungrily above. There's one particularly mesmerizing clip of a cook breaking open a tin of sea pie, a crusty dish that somehow includes beef, biscuits, pickled onions, and dried apples all in one terrifying harmony. It was a staple among British navies, especially in Arctic expeditions. You try to imagine what it tasted like, probably warm sadness with a hint of clove. A display case off to the side gleams under a copper spotlight. Inside is something stranger still, a Scythian horn cup, thought to be used for fermented mare's milk, nestled beside a furry bundle of dried cheese curds. Apparently, these nomadic horsemen carried their snacks in their saddlebags, drying curds under the sun until they became chewy like jerky. Good for long rides and short attention spans. Someone has scribbled in pen on the guide next to it. Not far from that, a barrel labeled "Pirate Grog" tempts your curiosity. A sleepy-eyed attendant in a tricorn hat sloshes you a thimbleful. It's a blend of watered-down rum, citrus juice, and something herbal. "Keeps scurvy and boredom at bay," she mutters, barely suppressing a yawn. It tastes like zesty regret. Beyond that lies the Polynesian canoe corner, where snacks and rituals were more poetic. Coconut chips dusted in sea salt. Roasted breadfruit wrapped in palm bark. Crushed taro root sweetened with honey. These were stored in woven baskets for long ocean voyages. The air smells like distant islands and toasted sugar. A carved board quotes a Tongan navigator, "To eat is to remember which way the stars turn." You nod at the wisdom, and possibly at the sugar crash. A side alcove introduces you to Viking provisions, which, you'll be pleased to know, were slightly more appealing than legend suggests. Dried fish, yes. But also slabs of cold smoked lamb, and something called skyr, an early yogurt still popular today in Iceland. There's a clay dish of berries soaked in mead, which you imagine eating slowly while staring into the cold fjords and pretending not to shiver in your furs. One placard explains how Norsemen would pass time aboard by carving bones, singing slow dirges, and yes, snacking relentlessly on what could best be described as combat cheese. And now, something utterly strange: Antarctic expedition rations from the early 20th century. Freeze-dried beef tea, pemmican bars made of fat and raisins, and biscuits so dry they were rumored to survive nuclear winter. Yet despite the grim-sounding fare, the notes attached are oddly warm. Crew members of Shackleton's voyage described mealtime as the highlight of their day. One added cinnamon to his rations just to pretend it was dessert. The human spirit, after all, finds its joys wherever it can, even in meat jam. You round the final corner and discover a table laid for one, Napoleon's private meal aboard ship. Fine porcelain, delicate silverware, and a single roasted quail leg on a pillow of chestnut puree. The sign says this was replicated from surviving menus, though whether he ate this often or only once is still debated. You smirk. Some things never change, like powerful men insisting on fancy poultry while their crew gnaws on bark. At the far end of the hall, a ramp leads upward. A sign reads, "Snack Archives, don't enter if hungry." You enter anyway. Inside is a rotating carousel of fictional maritime snacks featured in literature and sailor folklore. Pickled mermaid hair, kraken jerky, moonfish pudding. These are, of course, completely made up, but the models are lovingly crafted and surprisingly appetizing. A sleepy narrator's voice echoes from the ceiling, describing each dish in the tone of someone describing clouds. It's oddly soothing, like bedtime stories for the belly. As the carousel spins slowly, you find a bench in the corner and sit down, the rhythm of the rotating platform lulling you like waves. The room feels hushed, the lights dim. There's no more molasses, no more grog, just quiet, salt-scented air and the faint sound of someone softly humming a sea shanty from somewhere behind the curtain. You lean back, let your shoulders drop, and think about all the strange snacks you've encountered tonight. Some chewy, some briny, some inexplicably spicy. But each one, a bite of someone's memory, someone's survival, someone's slow drift across oceans of time. The curtain behind the sea shanty bench ripples slightly, and because curiosity still outweighs sleep, for the moment, you rise and slip behind it. On the other side is a narrow hallway, walls lined with flickering lanterns and worn wooden panels etched with faded nautical tattoos. The air smells faintly of wax and cinnamon. You're not sure if you're supposed to be back here, but no one stops you. No one's around at all. Eventually, the hallway opens into a rotunda of glowing exhibits. A slow-turning globe in the center spins on its axis with an audible hum, the oceans painted in dreamy pastels, dotted with food-themed pins. Around the perimeter, new stories begin to unfold, softly, almost whispering their way into your ears as you walk. One corner features a velvet-draped cabinet labeled, Emperor Ashoka's Edible Edicts. Inside, gilded scrolls describe how this Indian ruler, after years of conquest, turned to Buddhism and banned the killing of animals in his court. Meals became centered around lentils, mangoes, spiced rice cakes, and milk sweets. Historians still argue whether these dietary reforms were spiritual or political in origin, a placard notes. Either way, it's the first time you've read a royal edict that ends with a dessert recommendation. Across the room, a flickering hologram of an old Ottoman kitchen displays a slow-motion pilaf dance, grains of rice leaping through the air in time with invisible music, eventually landing in copper pots sizzling with lamb, apricots, and pine nuts. This was Suramat Feji, palace cuisine crafted by elite chefs who trained for decades. One fringe tidbit says a sultan once demoted a cook not for bad taste, but for plating that didn't inspire poetic dreams. Next to that is a glowing bonsai tree surrounded by carved panels illustrating samurai-era tea-house snacks. Small lacquered trays hold dainty mochi, grilled rice cakes, and pressed fish wrapped in lotus leaf. You learn that many samurai, contrary to the bellowing brutes of pop culture, appreciated quiet tea rituals, sometimes composing haiku between bites of roasted chestnut. In fact, some warriors were said to judge opponents not just by their swordsmanship, but by the quality of their pickled plum. Another display nearby brings you back westward, to Parisian apothecaries in the 1700s, where sweet snacks doubled as medicine. Candied violets for indigestion. Caramel-coated almonds for melancholy. A bowl of anise seeds rolled in honey and shaped into tiny pearls, said to calm anxiety and make the tongue more agreeable. That last one feels oddly familiar. You pop one into your mouth. It tastes like a perfumed cough drop left in a drawer for 20 years. Not bad, honestly. A tall, fogged glass chamber labeled Colonial Sleep Drafts pulls you in next. Bottles, flasks, and teacups float behind the glass, each with sleepy names: Mother Biddle Slumber Cordial, Night Root Elixir, and Chamomile and Lettuce Tonic. Lettuce. Yes, you read it right. According to the accompanying text, lettuce was believed to have soporific properties, often steeped into late-night brews in 18th-century America. Whether this was placebo or potent remains debated, says the sign, cheekily. You imagine Thomas Jefferson sipping a lettuce latte by candlelight and chuckle quietly. But of course, not all was quaint. One more solemn alcove, darker than the rest, outlines enslaved people's diets in the Caribbean plantations. Meager rations of salted fish, yam, and cornbread were often supplemented by secretly grown herbs and foraged fruits. These hidden gardens became acts of resistance and remembrance, preserving ancestral flavors under brutal conditions. You stop here for a while. The air is quiet, heavy, and necessary. When you move again, it's to a brighter section, one covered in embroidered cloths and glowing lanterns. A sign welcomes you to Midnight Markets of the Song Dynasty. Here, animations show noodle vendors twirling dough with ballet-like precision, tofu peddlers scooping from steaming buckets, children clutching sesame candy shaped like dragons. You can almost hear the bustle, almost smell the sweet soy and charred onions. And just when you think it can't get more immersive, a gentle mist releases from the ceiling, rice-scented and warm. It's ridiculous. It's perfect. You pass an attendant asleep in a wicker chair beside a model of a Zulu grain silo, filled with sorghum and wild millet. There's a note on her lap. Try the honeyed groundnuts. They're in the calabash. You do. They crunch like caramelized secrets. One final alcove draws you in with soft golden lighting and the soothing chime of bells. A sign reads, "The last meal before the long journey." Here, a mosaic of traditions are displayed side by side. The Maori haka meal of roasted eel and root vegetables, a Roman soldier's final rations before campaign, bread, garlic, and wine, a Tang Dynasty traveler's bundle of dried lotus seeds and tea cakes, and even a packet of candied ginger carried by Victorian women on steamship voyages to calm seasickness and nerves. You walk slowly now, each display like a page turning in a book already half remembered. The museum is emptying. The air cooler. The lanterns dimmer. Your body begins to sync with the pace of silence. You return to the central globe, which now turns slower, its hum deepening into a purr. You sit on a bench nearby, a tray of imaginary snacks in your lap. Somewhere far off, a lullaby of a different language is being sung. Your eyes close. Or maybe they flutter. The scent of rosewater, rice, and salted citrus curls around you like a blanket. And your last thought before slipping further inward is a sleepy murmur of gratitude for the strange and wonderful bites of history that humans have nibbled through time. And now, the lights dim further. The last flickers of the lanterns settle into amber glows. The carousel of flavors, the echoes of distant marketplaces, the hush of ancient kitchens, they all dissolve slowly, like sugar in warm tea. You lean back. Let your limbs loosen. Feel the softness in your breathing. Whatever path brought you here, through clattering fairs and misty exhibits, through jellied eels and fermented mare's milk and pickled dreams, it's led you to this moment of stillness, of gentle darkness, of a mind wandering just loosely enough to let sleep in. Imagine yourself on a quiet ship, sails slack, drifting through the night. The ocean beneath is calm, and the stars above are just beginning to blur. There is no urgency, no need to arrive, just the rocking of time, and a belly full of stories. Inhale and exhale. Let go of the questions. Let go of the journey. Let your thoughts float like paper lanterns, each one fading upward until they're nothing but dim points, quiet and kind. You are safe. You are still. You are home, even in your dreams. Sleep now, gentle traveler.